Good morning, everyone. Welcome to test prep time. Hope everyone's doing well. Just a reminder, we'll be meeting every day during the week, Monday through Friday, for test prep time at 11 a.m. Just about a 15-minute short session to show you some really important strategies and skills that are necessary for success on the SAT and the ACT. Again, a lot of these skills that we're covering are also really relevant for schoolwork, whether it's English or math or even some science, social studies. A lot of topics that we're going to cover will help you tremendously in other areas as well. But we're focusing on specific strategies for the SAT and ACT, looking at insights and recognizing certain patterns and just getting a good preparation for knowing what's going to be on these tests so you can move through them with a lot more effectiveness and efficiency and score your best. I wanted to put up a quick reminder before we jumped in that we do a lot of tutoring all year long, and especially online tutoring. If you haven't tried or done online tutoring yet, it can be really successful with the technology we have. It's almost seamless. It's like meeting in person. It's very flexible. You can sort of open your computer wherever. You don't have to worry about traveling anywhere. We do a lot of course, SAT and ACT private tutoring, but we also do a lot of academic subject tutoring, including preparation for the AP exams, which will still be coming up in May, biology, chemistry, calculus. If you're working on any of these subjects, especially now with this time away from being at physical school, you might be having some challenges keeping up with everything, or just being able to cover a lot of material without having a teacher there. We can help you out. So just reach out. We have a lot of excellent tutors on our team in all the subject areas, and we can work with you on SAT, ACT, and academic subjects. All right, today I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the English section of the SAT and ACT. Now, the English sections of the SAT and ACT are very, very similar. So a lot of the content and the strategies and the ideas that we're working on for either test will be the same for both. So a lot of what I'm talking about today will be covering for both tests. So one nice thing is if you transition between the SAT and ACT, you can use the same ideas here. They apply very broadly to both exams. It's the part of these two tests that are most similar. Now, this slide that I have up right now has a lot of information. We're going to go through a few pieces of this, but I just wanted to start here because I find that this is probably one of the most important things that you can learn or understand about going into the SAT or ACT English section. Now, the SAT calls it writing and language. I'll just refer to it from here on out as English because that's essentially what it is. ACT calls it the English section. Obviously, there's a lot of rules in English. There's a lot of things you need to know if you were learning English for the first time. There's a lot of details, a lot of rules and exceptions. I don't want students to get overwhelmed with all that information. What you want to be doing is preparing yourself efficiently. You want to be focused on the things that are actually going to show up. For instance, there's not any spelling on these tests. So learning how to spell is a good skill, but it's not going to help you tremendously on these exams. Knowing that is important, right? You want to know what you want to focus on. So what I'm showing on this slide is an attempt to sort of decode or understand better the English section. The English section is primarily dealing with ideas about grammar or what we'll call rhetoric questions. And this is a big first framework to have in thinking about the English section. There's two different styles of questions, really. And you need to be used to both styles. If we were looking at math here, I could say, okay, on math, you're going to see some geometry, that's like shapes and pictures, or you're going to see some algebra, that's like formulas and variables. It's all math, and they're very related, but they're kind of two different styles of math, right? Same here on English. You have two different styles, grammar and rhetoric. And this little chart you see at the top, this is hugely valuable because this is the list of the main concepts that are tested on the English section. So rather than overwhelm yourself with trying to learn everything about English, these 10 or 12 ideas, these are going to cover about 90% of everything you're going to see on the English section. Now, real quick, grammar rules are what you tend to think of when you think of English. These are the rules about mechanics, usage, agreement, basically all the things you would need to know to put together a proper English sentence from the beginning to the end of the sentence. You have all the pieces you need, and it makes sense, and it's a complete thought. All those things involve grammar, knowing rules like verb tense and verb agreement, pronoun usage, punctuation, where do commas go. That's all grammar. That would be the basics of learning English. However, over on the rhetoric side, these questions are quite different, and you need to get used to these. These are involving English, but much less to do with the sort of nitpicky rules of grammar, things like punctuation, syntax. Rhetoric questions don't care so much about that, and in fact, the rhetoric questions will be, for the most part, grammatically correct. So that's not going to help you too much. What rhetoric questions are focused on are meaning, ideas. They're much more like reading comprehension questions. They're asking, do you actually understand what's being talked about in this paragraph or sentence or passage? So when you're on a rhetoric question, you want to kind of shift gears. You're kind of using a totally different part of your brain almost. You want to be focusing on understanding what the passage is saying, not just looking at individual parts of a sentence, for instance. So a couple of examples of rhetoric questions here. Relevancy, add, delete, transition. We're going to look at a few examples in a moment, but these are the most common rhetoric questions that come up. And if you anticipate them, if you get used to how they're asked, you can get really good at these. They always take a little bit of time and a little bit of, deciphering it and looking at it closely, but you'll start to get really practiced at anticipating these and seeing the same type of questions come up again and again. Let's look at a few quick examples. And just before we do, I want to highlight a few ideas about rhetoric. Again, the grammar is mostly about basic rules, whereas rhetoric is about the meaning of the text. How are they expressing their ideas? What's relevant? What is actually the topic of the paragraph? All those things come into play. It helps to know the most common rhetoric type questions in this list you just saw. And we'll look at a few examples to reinforce that. What you're doing often on rhetoric questions is focusing on the basic idea or meaning of the sentences and the answers. You're often on rhetoric questions going to have to skim or read maybe the whole paragraph to understand the main idea of the topic, whereas on grammar questions, you can primarily focus on the sentence itself. In rhetoric questions, you're going to have to look a little bit beyond the sentence to understand more about what's going on. And here's a good tip. Relevancy, or what's relevant or what's related, is a real common theme throughout almost all rhetoric questions. So knowing how ideas relate or connect to each other is a real big theme. Okay, let's take a look at a few quick examples. First, add or delete questions. These come up every test. There's a lot of them on the English sections of both the SAT and the ACT. You got to get used to these. First, what these questions are essentially asking are, should the writer of this passage add this sentence or not, or delete this sentence or not? So they give you a sentence to consider. Should it be added or should we delete a sentence? That's what you're deciding here. What this really comes down to is understanding two things you need to check. One, is the sentence actually related to what's going on here? Does it make sense where it is? Does it belong here in this paragraph or this section? Is it related to the other ideas in the paragraph? That's your first check. If it's relevant, if it's related, then you probably do want to add it. If it's not related, you probably want to delete it. But you also want to be careful and check for repeated ideas. So it might be relevant, but if they just said it in the last sentence or the last paragraph, you probably don't need to add it twice. So you don't want to be redundant or repetitious. The flip side of that, if it's relevant, but it's not, it's already been stated, then you can delete it. And so you're really asking yourself, where does this sentence belong here or not? Now, if you notice in the question, Not only do you have to choose, should you delete this sentence, yes or no, but you see that there's 4 choices, 2 yeses and 2 nos. Not only do you decide yes or no to the delete or add question, but you also have to choose the right reason. So if you look at the sentence and you decide, hey, this probably doesn't belong here, and you're leaning towards the no answers, that's fine. You can eliminate the yeses or vice versa. But I want to give you a warning. Don't rush that process. Because you're going to have to pick the reason anyway, I often take a moment to read through those reasons because they can tip me off to ideas that maybe I didn't even think about. Reading the explanations can give you insight as to what the right answer is. Let's take a quick look at this example. Number 6 is asking, the writer is considering deleting the underlined sentence. Should the writer do this? Okay, I'm going to go back to the sentence that's there, but as I said, with most rhetoric questions, you're probably going to have to read a little bit more. Now, just to help you out a bit, the previous paragraph that's not included here was talking about Greek yogurt. Many of you may have tried some Greek yogurt. It can be delicious. But the previous paragraph was talking about some of the problems with Greek yogurt, just producing all the yogurt causes some environmental problems. It can be very costly. So they talk about some problems with Greek yogurt production. And now I start this paragraph off with a sentence that says, though these conservation methods can be costly and time-consuming, they are well worth the effort. So it's a sentence that seems to contain the idea that there are some problems, but they may be worth the effort. In the next few sentences, if you skim those or read through those, you find out it's a healthy food considered by nutritionists. It's got calcium and protein, a good digestive aid, few calories, lower in sugar and carbs, more concentrated. So it's going now through a list seemingly of the benefits of Greek yogurt, the things that are good with Greek yogurt. So if I'm considering this sentence, what I do want to look at is the idea or meaning of this, right? This is about transitioning maybe from the negatives to the positives of Greek yogurt. Okay, let me look at my answer choices. Do I want to delete this? A, yes, because it does not provide a transition from the previous paragraph. Well, we don't have that previous paragraph here, but I just want to note, sorry about that. I just want to note that it was about the sort of negatives or the downsides. And so here, I do actually have a good transition from mentioning there are negatives to the positives. So I don't think A is the answer. I don't want to delete this, and I don't think that's a good reason to. Choice B, yes, I do want to delete it because it fails to support the main argument of the passage as introduced in the first paragraph. Well, again, we don't have the first paragraph here. You can see how often these rhetoric questions require us to read a bit more, not just the paragraph, sometimes to go back a little bit to previous paragraphs. But this is still in line with the ideas in this passage about the benefits or drawbacks of Greek yogurt. So I'm not going to choose B here. Let's look at choices C and D. Now we're on the no choices, so saying we don't want to delete it. C, no, because it continues the explanation of how acid whey can be disposed of safely. I don't see anything in the sentence about the disposal of acid whey. Let's look at D. No, because it sets up the argument in the paragraph for the benefits of Greek yogurt. Aha, that's what I was looking for. This does introduce the benefits of Greek yogurt, and this sentence sort of the negatives that the last paragraph they start listing after this sentence. So add deletes are very common. You want to get used to them. They take a little bit of time. Don't rush these. In fact, I take my time very carefully on a lot of rhetoric questions because they require a little extra reading and understanding. If you can eliminate yeses or nos, that's great. You can eliminate half of the choices, but be careful, don't rush it. Often reading the explanations can give you further insight. All right, let's take a look at another type of rhetoric question. Transition questions. Now, transition questions involve primarily choosing the right transition word. Now, transition words are words like you see here: therefore, thus, moreover, however. They're words that are serving as a link or a connection. They're linking a earlier idea to a later idea. So really, the best way to approach these transition questions are to go find out what was the idea just before the transition word and what's the idea just after the transition word. Now, it's not just the sentence before or after. You might have to go a little farther, but you want to be focused on what is the idea that happened just previously and the idea that happens just after it. Now, again, we're dealing with the idea in rhetoric of connecting ideas or what's relevant. There are 4 common types of transition. Either addition, you're just showing more of the same, so furthermore or in addition to. There's comparison, you're showing what's similar, likewise, similarly. There's contrast, showing what's different, however, nevertheless, despite. And then there's cause and effect, thus, therefore, where the first idea is the reason for the second idea. Let's take a look at this question in that context. First, they give me the word therefore as the no change option, choice A. I always start there because if it's fine and it's correct, great, choose no change and move on. It's as good an answer as any other. But if it's not correct, I'll cross off A and I'm down to 3 choices. So let's take a look. But I want to start, like I said, with the idea just before the transition and then look at the idea just after. Well, just before the transition, I can read even at the beginning of the paragraph just to find out that philosophy at schools is an important track to study, important subject to look at. But recently, there's been less and less philosophy taught at colleges. In line 37, you see a 1994 survey concluded that only 18% of American colleges required at least one philosophy course. I'm going to skip the word and go now to the next idea. So basically, the first idea, summarize it for yourself, put it in plain English. Not a lot, only